We are gathered here to fill you with fear and give you a treat for your ears as we invade your mind with our scary rhymes and some tales that can be gory. As you bear witness and sit here and listen to our poetic horror stories. Gumbo is a rich, dark stew. It's a thick soup whose base starts with a flavorful roux. This dish is very popular in America, a major specialty in Louisiana. Gumbo is believed to have started in Louisiana in the early 18th century. It is often believed to be a dish of mixed origins, of African, French, Spanish, Native American, Caribbean, and German influence. Enslaved African Americans often exchanged or combined ingredients in order to make the dish. They used it as a way, allowing it to serve as a means of identity and community. Records indicate that by 1764, Africans in New Orleans mixed cooked okra with rice to make it a meal. There are many types of gumbo, including Creole, Cajun, seafood, and vegetable. And all these gumbos are made with different kinds of ingredients. The best gumbo, to me, is Louisiana Creole gumbo, made with seafood. It's really filling. It's the best. Especially when my Granny Rose would make it for me as a kid. But I wasn't the only person who loved my Granny Rose's gumbo. In fact, people enjoyed her gumbo so much. My Granny Rose opened her own restaurant. Her restaurant grew fast by word of mouth. Every night, we always had a packed house. We hosted aristocrats, presidents, celebrities, and athletes. If they were well known by the public, they ate here. The restaurant even made my Granny Rose famous, and it brought in tons of money. The restaurant was very profitable and lucrative. But the restaurant also held a deep, dark family secret. And I was chosen by Granny Rose to inherit this dark family secret, to keep it going. I was going to be shown the truth of Granny Rose's dark and secretive recipe. This is just a friendly reminder to please like and comment to let us know how we are doing so far. We would love to hear from you all. And if you're new, please subscribe and become a part of the PHS crew. And we thank you. Hello, my name is Kimberly, and I'm in my early 20s. I work for my granny here at her Creole restaurant. It's called Rose's Creole Kitchen, where we serve popular Louisiana Creole dishes. Actually, my whole family works here. My mother, father, brother, grandchildren, cousins, uncles, and aunties. They are hostesses, waiters, waitresses, cashiers, dishwashers, cooks, trappers, and accountants. Yes, you can say it's a family affair. But my Granny Rose is the only one that cooks the gumbo. She told me.
My gumbo is a closely guarded family secret. It was passed down from my great-grandmother to my grandmother, and now I'm passing it on to you. It can never leave our family. The recipe isn't written down anywhere. The recipe is locked away in my head, and when the time is right, I will walk you through the process.
I was excited when Granny Rose chose me, out of all of her grandchildren, to teach. She was entrusting me with our family secret gumbo recipe. I told my granny,
I'm honored, and I accept the responsibility. I will do my best to make the gumbo the same way you make it.
I could tell this made her happy, and at that moment, I was too. But now, I wish I never agreed to this, because when I found out Granny Rose's secret recipe that made her gumbo so addictive to so many people, it would be too late. My uncle and his 2 teenage sons would be the ones to go out every day to trap crawfish, frogs, and baby alligators from the pond and swamps. Granny Rose would only use fresh ingredients in her gumbo. She wouldn't have it any other way. We even had our own sea boat that would catch crabs, fish, and shrimp. That is what Granny Rose believes set her restaurant up for success. It made her restaurant the best. She even raised her own chickens that she would use in her chicken and sausage gumbo. She would go out personally to the chicken shack and pick the biggest chicken, and she would break their necks. She would then pluck their feathers and chop them up. And believe me, she uses every part of the chicken, either in her dishes or other ways. Nothing went to waste. My Granny Rose was a sweet older lady, but she was also very cunning, calculated, and ruthless when it came to her business. She didn't play. Granny Rose was building an empire. She wanted to leave us with a legacy of generational wealth once she left this world behind. She was going to make sure we went down in history as one of the richest black families in the country. We would be likened to the Rockefellers, the Kennedys, hell, the Kardashians. She wanted our family to be solidified. She wanted our name to become a household brand. Granny Rose was an unstoppable force to be reckoned with. She worked out deals with major grocery store chains. She had her own line of Granny Rose sauces, rubs, and seasonings. She advertised like crazy. She went on talk and radio shows. She made her own YouTube channel and would edit and upload cooking videos. Her channel name was Cooking with Granny Rose. She started her own social media campaign on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, and Snapchat. She was a marketing genius. She was amazing. She even wrote her own cookbook with all her famous and popular recipes. That is, except for one, her gumbo. She wouldn't sell it for any amount of money. You could only eat her gumbo at our restaurant, at Granny Rose's exclusively. And this is why she needed me. It was now time for me to learn Granny Rose's secret gumbo recipe.
She spilled most of it on me. I told her, I'm going to the bathroom to clean myself up. She said, we have no time. Now give me that measuring cup. I turned my back for a second to pick up the cup and to pass it to her. But when I turned around, she had a big knife in her hand, and I believed her intention was murder.
Granny Rose told me we had a family motto. She told me,
when you cook with your heart and soul, the people will always come back for more. I believe people can feel your heart when you cook, which feeds people's bodies, which feeds their souls, which keeps them coming back for more. You have to understand this, Kimberly. This is the secret to cooking my gumbo recipe. Yes, I understand, Granny Rose. Good, child, because tonight, once the restaurant is closed, I will teach you how to cook my gumbo. Don't worry, I'm ready. I can't wait.
I said with excitement. Our restaurant closes every day at midnight, and there were no exceptions for tonight. Once the restaurant was cleaned, most of my family went home. Except for my uncle and his 2 sons, my teenage cousins. They stayed behind with Granny Rose and me. My uncle and my cousins were big, tall, and muscular. They looked very intimidating. They were the trappers who would trap Granny Rose's fresh ingredients every day. They would do anything and everything Granny Rose would say. When I look back at that night, I should have known something wasn't right. I had to stay in the restaurant as Granny Rose, my uncle, and cousins started to prepare. I had to admit, I was extremely nervous. About 30 minutes later, my uncle and cousins came and got me. They led me back down the windy path to the chicken shack. When I entered, it was dark, except for some candles that were eerily flickering. The candles were placed in a circle with a big black pot in the middle of them. The pot was placed on a fire pit, and I could hear the water inside boiling and simmering. Suddenly, from behind a black curtain, Granny Rose appeared. She was in a black hoodie cloak, and her face was partially covered. I said,
Granny Rose, is that you? What's going on here? I thought you were going to show me how to make your gumbo.
Granny Rose didn't say a word to me. She just stood there in front of the big black pot silently. Suddenly, Granny Rose began to chant, at first quietly to herself. Then her voice began to raise. She threw her arms up into the air and her head back. Then she said,
Our great ancestors, please accept this offering.
That's when I realized Granny Rose had a knife in her hand. She took the knife and sliced her hand open, and blood started to run down her arms. She then placed her hand over the big black pot. The blood dripped into the pot. I just watched as the steam raised from the heat. I wanted to run out of the shack, but I was petrified and I couldn't move my feet. I thought to myself, Granny Rose was going to sacrifice me? Suddenly, Granny Rose looked at my uncle and cousins, and she said,
Please retrieve my ingredients.
She then looked at me and beckoned.
Kimberly, come over here. Stand next to me.
I had never been so terrified in my life. I willed my body to move as I stood there beside her. Then she said,
Tonight, my child, I will show you the way. The way I create my gumbo with the secret ingredient.
My cousins suddenly reappeared with a live chicken and a crate of live crabs, crawfish, saffron, basil, white onions, green bell pepper, celery, the holy trinity of cooking. They also had garlic, okra, and her seasonings. And my cousins dumped them all in the big black pot all at once. I would have been impressed if I wasn't so scared. Then Granny Rose snapped the neck of the chicken. Then she placed the chicken on a concrete slab, and then she cut off the chicken's head. But she didn't use the chicken as a part of the ingredients. She turned to me and poured the chicken's blood on my head. As my cousin and Granny Rose started to chant, I begged them to stop, but they weren't listening. Then my uncle came back into the shack, and he wasn't alone. With him, he walked in with a gagged and tied up man. I could see the fear in the man's eyes, as my own eyes filled with tears as I started to cry. Then Granny Rose said,
We are gathered here today to initiate Kimberly, my granddaughter, and show her how we make our gumbo with the freshest ingredients. This is a special secret recipe that has been passed on for generations from my great-grandmother to my grandmother, and now from me to you, Kimberly, my successor. And eventually you will pass it down to your granddaughter, and so forth and on. You are now tasked with keeping this tradition alive, and you are now bonded to keep our family secret. Kimberly, do you understand?
Granny Rose looked at me for confirmation. I didn't know what to do, so I slowly nodded my head.
Good. Now, let the ritual commence.
My uncle and cousins started to wrestle with the man. The man was doing the best he could to fight them back. But in the end, he didn't win. They laid him down on a concrete slab, the same place Granny Rose cut off the chicken's head. My uncle and cousins held the man down, as we all gathered around. Then Granny Rose took my hand and she placed a sharp dagger into it. She said,
Kimberly, I place this knife into your hands to cut out the heart of this man. Once you retrieve his heart out of his chest, then you will place it into the black pot with the other ingredients.
I couldn't believe this was the secret to her gumbo recipe. I looked at Granny Rose and I told her,
No, I can't do that. I won't. This is wrong.
And I dropped the dagger on the floor. Granny Rose looked at me with such malice that I've never seen. She said,
You dare to defy me? After all I have done for you and our family. You said this is what you wanted. You agreed. You will do this, Kimberly. You will obey me.
As Granny Rose said those words, I started to feel something strange take over me. I had no control of my body. I feel like Granny Rose took over my soul. My will was no longer my own. I could see myself pick up the dagger. I had a tight grip on it in my hand. Suddenly, I plunged it deep into the chest of the man. Then I digged my hand deep into the man's chest cavity, as the man howled and screamed in pain and agony. But I emerged with the man's still beating heart in my hand, and then I turned and dropped it into the black pot. Then Granny Rose said,
Now, the gumbo ritual is complete. Now we will let it cook slowly for the rest of the day, to really bring out the flavor we are known for.
I was rendered speechless. I couldn't believe what just happened. Granny Rose looked at me and smiled as she wiped away the chicken blood off my face and head. Then she said,
It's okay. The first time is always the roughest, but eventually it'll become easy. You only have to do this once a month. That's why we use this big black pot. Your uncle and cousins will trap and provide you with all the fresh ingredients you need. Sometimes we use men, sometimes we use women. Occasionally we use children. We don't discriminate. And don't worry about the police or authorities. As long as they accept our contributions, they have no problem looking the other way. Now, Kimberly, this is important that you have to be the one who cuts out the heart for the recipe to be a success and complete the ritual. And Kimberly, remember our family motto, when you cook with your heart and soul, the people will always come back for more.